Welcome to the NFRW on the Issues. This is where we tackle the most pressing issues facing our nation with the insight of Republican leaders who are making a difference. Today, we're discussing the landmark Supreme Court decision upholding Tennessee's law protecting minors from irreversible gender transition procedures, a ruling that validates important legislation that was first blazed by our special guest today. So I'm thrilled to welcome Representative Robin Lundstrum from Arkansas. She sponsored the SAFE Act in 2021. Robin was first elected in the Arkansas House of Representatives in 2015, and she made history as a lead sponsor of the SAFE Act, the first state law in the nation to protect minors from irreversible gender transition procedures. But let's call it what it really is. It's medical mutilation and chemical castration of children. Her courageous leadership in 2021 illuminated the path for 27 other states to follow Arkansas's example in protecting our children. It just took one determined Republican woman willing to stand up for what's right to spark a nationwide movement that has now protected many children across America. I was with Robin during this time. I was her campaign manager back in 2015, and we've been very good friends for many years. And so we have a prayer team. Robin, when she was elected, immediately one of the first things she did is she kept her prayer team that she had during the campaign. We still have that same prayer team, by the way. We're on a group chat. And so we were with Robin through this process. And what seems like common sense now, and we're seeing 27 states, including Arkansas. I misspoke earlier. I think there's 26 with Arkansas's 27. It seems like common sense, like everyone would accept or be willing to support legislation like this. This was not the case when Robin stepped up and was the lead sponsor for this bill. As a matter of fact, it was vetoed by a Republican governor, but thankfully we had enough to override that veto, and even more than enough to override that veto. But she had death threats. She had to tighten security for her home. I remember, Robin, when we went to Missouri, because they were interested in doing a similar piece of legislation. I rode down to Jefferson City with you. Couldn't even get it out of committee.
Yep.
But now we look and we see 26 other states along with Arkansas. So we're going to talk about the Supreme Court ruling. And I know that our listeners are very well versed and on top of issues, but I'm going to go over just simply what the ruling was. By a vote of 6-3, the justices rejected an argument by 3 transgender teens, along with their parents and a Memphis doctor, that the law violates their constitutional right to equal protection and should be scrutinized using a more stringent standard. So simply put, Tennessee law is not subject to heightened scrutiny because it does not draw classifications based on sex. So unpack that a little bit and tell us what implications this has for Arkansas's law, the first to pass, which is still in court, and what could this mean for Arkansas law as well as the other pieces of legislation making their way through the court?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for all your help getting me elected. It was definitely a team, and this bill was a team. We had 62 co-sponsors, and all 62 said, my political career is less important. Kids are more important. And I'm happy to say that all 62 made it back after re-election, because there were so many threats on those people. We're going to get you, that type of thing. That's not what happened. The people of this country and the people of the world get this issue. They get that mutilating a child is wrong. I mean, that should be a no-brainer, but now's day and time, gaslighting goes on. So as Republican women, we shine truth. And we do that with the facts. And the Scrimeti decision basically applies to all minors assigned with their gender assigned at birth. So they're not discriminating. They're just saying boys and boys or girls, and that states have the right to make laws. For example, you can't even take your child home from the hospital without a car seat. Children can't imbibe in alcohol until 21. can't vote until 18. We make those guardrails or gutters for our children to provide protection. And basically it upheld that law. It didn't go into a lot of the other issues. It's a fascinating decision. You can go on the Supreme Court website and actually listen to the oral arguments. If you're in a car and have a long trip, do that. It's quite fascinating, and it'll make you feel good as an American that they have a real oral discussion, and the background research on both sides. It's quite fascinating. But the Supreme Court didn't put up with a lot of this. They also came prepared. You can tell the judges came prepared with questions. So it was a 6-3 decision, which tells you that the Supreme Court pretty much put their foot down and had enough. The science is on our side, so we shouldn't be afraid of this issue. The biggest thing we have to guard against on this issue is not being kind, being firm and kind, because we're dealing with parents right now that are terrified. They have been told if they don't transition their child, that their child will die, that their child will commit suicide. And that's simply not the case. If they get good counseling, that's the key. These kids are gender confused. I'm very thankful when this bill was filed, there were 3 psychiatrists, psychologists in Arkansas that were physically treating children at the time that actually came forward. One of them lost her job. I mean, the attacks on these folks were tremendous. But when they came on board, one doctor had already treated 200 kids. And he did it with watchful waiting. And the other doctors concurred, watchful waiting, find out, have they been sexually abused? What are their health issues that the kids may be having? Is there something specific in the home? So there were a lot of things that you need to look at before immediately saying, oh, let's transition this kid. That's the worst thing we do. We don't go to an anorexic and say, yes, you're too fat. We're going to make you skinnier. Transgender is a cry for help. And so as Republican women, our response when we have someone that says, we're doing these horrible things, we need to tamp down the drama and stick to the science and keep repeating the same thing over and over again. These are children. They can't make those decisions. One of the biggest surprises in this whole process, I would get calls from transgender adults and they would say, don't stop. This is a good bill. Why don't you say something? I'd love to have you come and speak. They were terrified, absolutely terrified. Their whole thing was, was a hard decision as an adult. Some were willing to stick with it. Some were detransitioning. But their whole thing was, there's no way a 12-year-old can make this decision. A 17-year-old shouldn't be making this decision. One of them was, I was 35 and I don't know that was the best decision for me. How can you ask a child to do this? This is a choice. Wow. So don't assume that they're all on, it's a Republican versus Democrat. There's a lot of misinformation, and somebody that you might think is not your friend really turns out to be in agreement with you.
Thank you. Well, this ruling pretty much just validated what most parents know. Children change their mind. I mean, they can't even get a tattoo, right? And children don't even know what they want to be when they grow up. They can't even settle on a college major, even when they are past 18. But we are allowing, and in some cases, adults advocating for irreversible medical harm, and it is committing these kids to lifelong medical treatment for the rest of their life. They're never free from it. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. What they're opening themselves up to is cardiovascular disease, all kinds of heart issues, cerebral vascular disease, failure to urinate for the rest of their lives. There are all kinds of problems. Then there's osteoporosis, that will early onset osteoporosis. So you take a male and you give him female hormones and his hormones go down. The clash is amazing. Yes, somebody put in autoimmune disorders. There's a whole list of things. As one transgender gentleman put it to me, I am living my life as a male as a female who has transitioned to a male. So I'm going to have the horrible things that happen to all of us as we age together. Who wants to go through menopause and go through prostate issues and all the other issues that the guys go through. Doing it once as a normal human being is enough, but aging twice, the osteoporosis issue is starting to rear its head in a terrible way. So the mental health issues, the pain that they're going through. There's even as one transgender gentleman put it to me, there is a term that they use. They call it the 7-year itch. And I was like, what are you talking about? He said, after 7 years of getting a penis, putting in this, going through all the medications, you realize after 7 years that it's not going to get any better, that you're going to be a patient for the rest of your life. Scott was life flighted because of the amount of infection that he had. And he's been an advocate for not doing this for children and slowing the process for adults. But he's very firm in his belief that this should never happen to a child. So for the rest of their life, they're sick. And we're telling people, don't say anything about that. Don't detransition. That's the wrong thing to do. If you're in a hole, quit digging. This is their health and their life. So as Republican women, we need to always speak the truth. We need to be very kind. These parents are in a horrible situation. They've been told by the white coat doctor that if you don't do this, your child is going to commit suicide. So as a parent, they don't feel like they have other options. Well, just like anything else in healthcare, when you have a big decision, you go get a second opinion. And right now that's difficult. I agree. But there are groups of doctors. Talked to a group just last week that's in the Washington, D.C. area that's actually putting together protocols for helping people detransition. So doctors are aware of this.
So hearing all of this devastation and knowing that some parents are probably victims too, how did we get here? I mean, just not even knowing the inside story about how tragic it is to the human body, it makes no common sense just on the emotional level. But now that we're talking on the physical, scientific level, how did we get here? It's not the majority of Americans.
No.
So why did it sweep our country, and why is it so hard to get lasting legislation to protect our children?
Well, first of all, I think it swept our country. It's just a psychological phenomenon. And we don't want to, Americans are always optimists. If you want to do this, sure. If you want to start your own business, sure. And we're also kind of a live and let live type of attitude. And sometimes the word no has to come into our parenting philosophy. So I think nationally, we just don't like to get involved in other people's business. And I get that. That's a good thing. But there comes a time and place to say no. I had a discussion with a family member about they were not happy with the SAFE Act. And I said, let's step back and talk about something. If you were going to put your hand on a stove, on a hot stove, would you want me to pull your hand back and yell, don't touch that? Or would you want me to go, oh, I affirm that decision. Go ahead and touch that hot stove. That is your choice. Because that's what we're doing here. We're affirming a bad choice. And in the 1950s and even earlier, we didn't affirm bad choices. If you were the town drunk, we looked down on you. The peer pressure has changed to the point where we're not helping our fellow Americans. We're not supporting those parents. They feel like they've got no other choice. And now it's become political, which makes it even more difficult. The good thing I see on the horizon, though, is other countries have already pulled back. The United Kingdom, Finland, the Netherlands, all of these countries have pulled back. The American people have used their common sense, and they completely, I think this polls like 75 to 80% of adults, American adults, are not for this. We're still letting that vocal minority, because of our tendency to live and let live, we don't want to get involved. There comes a time to say, no. So if someone in your state senate or state representative decides to run this bill, there's been 26 states. There's a good website, Family Policy Foundation has a do no harm, first do no harm. And they've listed all of these different states that have done this. But if you have somebody that is going to run that bill, surround them. surround them. It will make a huge difference. There's nothing wrong with common sense.
Okay, so I wanted to also point out that Representative Robin Lundstrum actually has her doctorate in human health, but she would tell all of you and everyone listening that you don't have to have a doctorate to understand common sense and to have a desire to protect our children. I'm going to ask an important question, and then we're going to go to our political director, Nikki Beaver, who received questions ahead of the program to ask, and then some have come up in the chat. Actually, I'm going to ask you two questions. First, and I'll ask them together. What can we do to help? You touched on a little bit. What can we do to help? And then, are you available as a speaker, as your schedule allows, to speak about this issue by Zoom or in person, if schedule allows, and if it's in your area or what have you? Just let us know your availability, and we'll get the word out, because this is an important issue.
Well, first of all, I am available. I'm always available. My cell phone, here I am. Let's go. I'm available to travel. That is perfectly fine. Zoom is wonderful. The biggest part of this whole legislation is simply and almost to the point of quietly speaking the truth instead of yelling and screaming. Everybody expects everybody to go to yell and scream. That is not what we do on this issue. This is a science-based, calm issue that sometimes the less we say and what we do say needs to count. So I would encourage your state reps and state senators that you've got their backs. I walked on the House floor. In fact, I still have Julie, in Arkansas, we get pink slips. Anytime a constituent calls, we get pink slips. And there was a big pile of pink slips on my desk the day I was going to run this bill. And I thought, I'm not going to look. There'd been so many nasty calls. Well, finally, my curiosity got the best of me, and I picked up the first pink slip and turned it over, and it said, "Our church is praying for you." Picked up the next pink slip. I don't like you, but this is a good bill. And all the way down, there were 32 of them, and I kept those 32 pink slips because it was a good lesson for me to quit assuming the loud is always proud and right and boisterous. 32 of very nice comments and supportive. And they didn't know I was the supporter. They were just people in my district that said, you need to vote for this bill. And yes. So it does make a difference when Republican women call, text, send an email, just an encouragement that don't give up. Sometimes you have to run a bill more than once. But that needs to happen. We need to reach out to all these states that are doing it. And you can get an easy list. The Do No Harm from Family Policy is really good. So if you can't find it, call me.
Nikki, you got some questions for us?
Okay, yeah. So before we get to the questions, I did put a link in the chat for the Kansas Federation. They're having a Zoom with Terry Schilling from America Principles Project titled Gender Industrial Complex. I think Deborah Tilden, she's in the chat if you have any questions on that, but we put that registration link in there in case you want to check that out too. The first question is, do you believe this practice is part of the depopulation obsession movement?
I don't know if it is or it isn't. I can't speak to that, but it sure works in their favor because now they can't have children. They also don't have sexual function. So you lose bowel and bladder function, you lose sexual function, and you're castrated. It's condemning these people to a life of pain. And you mentioned industrial complex. Think of all the people that make money on the process. The counselor that makes the money, the GP, the surgeon, the hospital, the pharmacy, PBMs. They've got a patient for life, all from starting with this. Oh, well, they identified as. So what if a little boy picked up a doll? My son picked up a doll and took the two breasts and used those as sights, and that went around the house going pow, pow, pow. Whoopee. It's ridiculous that we would fall into this type of trap. But remember, ladies, before the truth gets out of bed and puts her feet on the floor, a lie has already made it around the world. And so we're already behind because nobody wants to listen to, wait a second, maybe they need real counseling. Maybe there's been a problem. Maybe there's a family that's going through some trauma. And a good counselor will spend some time unpacking that and also give that child some coping skills. And they go on to live happy, healthy lives. That doesn't sell. Happy, healthy, normal functioning does not sell. And that's a real tragedy. Someone put up, so we're sterilizing children. Yes, we are sterilizing children.
Okay, one last question. How is this, well, you've kind of covered this a little bit, but can you tell us a little bit more about the suicidal ideations and comparing that to the other mental illness?
Well, first of all, there is an issue with suicidal rates in the transgender community, but I'm not sure that has anything to do with, first of all, I think that has more to do with the fact that they transition than anything else. There's quite a bit of research looking at suicidal ideation after transitioning. That first year, their peak emotions go up, their satisfaction rate goes up. And then afterwards, it starts to go down because now they're experiencing more of the bladder issues. They're experiencing more of the health issues. And the surgery wasn't enough. So they go back to get an Adam's apple shave or an eyebrow shave or facial reconstruction so that they look more feminine. And after 7 years, they realize this is never going to stop. I'm never going to be a male or a female. When I started out as in my own body as a male, I'm not going to be a female. And then they've got a decision to make. Do I detransition? Do I live where I am? Do I try to make a go of this? Or do I commit suicide? The sad thing is we're not tracking all those folks. And the ones that we do track, they have a 19% suicide rate. So basically, let's round that off 20. 1 in 5 suicide rate. We ought to be screaming from the top of our lungs on that issue alone. The medical community is doing these folks a grave disservice on that particular issue, but our screaming does not help. It doesn't help. Nobody's going to listen to us because they just see us as, oh, you're just going to be over here. You're just anti. No, we're not anti anybody. We're pro human being. We're pro child. And these are the issues that we need to look at. And that's one of the reasons the Travistock Clinic in London, which was one of the biggest clinics in the world, has now shut down. And other clinics are starting to shut down too. And in the US, as of last night, Pam Bondi actually filed, FBI is investigating 3 of the children's hospitals here. If your local children's hospital is participating in this, don't donate to them. Find out. Money talks. We don't need to be giving to children's hospitals that aren't going out, that are doing this. We need to be giving to children's hospitals that are going after childhood cancer. Time and place. Let's take care of these kids. Let's love on these kids, but let's not participate. So be careful where you donate your checks.
Hey, thank you to Representative Robin Lundstrum for sharing your words of wisdom and your insight with us today. Your work on this crisis proves that one Republican woman can change the course of history and protect our children across the nation. Thank you for joining us today on NFRW on the issues. Until next time, keep fighting for what matters most. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you for having me.